Before we begin, viewer discretion is strongly advised. The following is for educational and entertainment purposes only. What you're about to hear is the fictional, verbatim courtroom testimony from Day 15 of the federal trial against Sean Diddy Combs, as reported by Inner City Press. The gallery was packed, but the air changed when the judge called the next witness. Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, the most electrifying man in sports entertainment, a global superstar. No one saw it coming. Yet there he stood, stone-faced, hands clenched, visibly shaken. His testimony wasn't about movies, fame, or even betrayal. It was about destruction, rituals, psychological torment, and a boiling hot group bath with over 60 other celebrities that he says shattered his mind. Dwayne claimed Diddy ruined his family and stalked him for years, showing up even after he ran. But the moment that left the courtroom breathless was when The Rock, mid-testimony, got violently sick and had to excuse himself. What he said next changed everything. The courtroom doors creaked open with an eerie quiet as the bailiff announced, "The next witness, Dwayne Douglas Johnson." Heads snapped. Some gasped. Even reporters dropped their pens. The Rock? It was unthinkable. But there he was, larger than life, yet visibly diminished. No million-dollar smile. No swagger. Just a man weighed down by something darker than anyone in that courtroom expected. He took the stand with a slow, deliberate walk, each step like he was dragging the weight of a secret he'd carried for years. The judge instructed him to raise his right hand. Dwayne complied, but his hand trembled. The oath was recited, and he affirmed it with a quiet, "Yes." The courtroom, filled with press, legal teams, and spectators, was dead silent. Dwayne leaned into the microphone. "What I'm about to share isn't easy, and honestly, I've stayed quiet because I was scared. Scared for my family. Scared for my legacy. Scared for what it would do to the people watching." He paused, eyes scanning the room. "But I'm not scared anymore." He began with how he met Diddy. It was around 2006, during the peak of both of their careers. At first, he was charming, inviting, made you feel like you were part of some elite brotherhood. I was new to the Hollywood side of things, and Diddy had already been running that world for decades. The Rock described being invited to Diddy's mansion in Beverly Hills. "It wasn't like anything I'd seen before. The staff never spoke. There were rooms you weren't allowed to enter, and a dining room that always had candles burning, even in the middle of the day." But what struck him most wasn't the luxury. It was the behavior. "There were always people there," he said. "Big names, huge stars, but they acted different, obedient, like they were all waiting for something to begin." That night, Diddy told him, "Stick around. Tonight's special." Dwayne assumed it was some kind of after-party. He was wrong. That night would mark the beginning of what Dwayne now calls the unraveling, not just of his trust, but of his entire sense of safety. The Rock ended his first portion of testimony by saying, "You think you know who someone is when you see them on TV? But you don't. Not until you're in their house. Not until you're in their rituals. And by then, it's already too late." Dwayne's eyes narrowed as he continued, his voice deeper now, each word weighed down by memory. That night, it wasn't a party. It was something else. He described being led into a lower-level chamber of Diddy's mansion, what was called the Room. Diddy told him only a select few were ever invited. He said it was a rite of passage, a ritual for the ones who wanted to go higher, not just in Hollywood, in power. At first, Dwayne thought it was a joke, but as he descended the dimly lit staircase, lined with flickering candles and walls covered in mirrored glass, something shifted in the air. It smelled like incense and steel, the kind of smell you don't forget. And it was quiet, too quiet for a house full of people. When he entered the chamber, he saw what looked like a giant circular marble tub sunken into the floor. Steam curled from it, thick and fragrant. It was filled to the top with hot red liquid. At the time, I didn't know what it was. Later, I realized it was tomato soup. But that wasn't the shocking part. What took Dwayne's breath away were the people already there. There were over 60 celebrities in that room, he said, pausing to gather himself. Big names, the kind you see in movie theaters, in music videos, on the news, all sitting in the soup. They weren't talking. They weren't smiling. They were still, silent. Some with closed eyes, others staring blankly ahead. Every single one of them naked from the waist down. Diddy entered the room in a flowing red and gold robe, chanting under his breath. He held what Dwayne could only describe as a ladle-like staff, tapping it on the rim of the tub with a steady rhythm. "I tried to leave," Dwayne said, his voice cracking slightly. "I turned around, but two large men, security maybe, were blocking the exit. Diddy looked at me and smiled. 'It's your turn, Rock.' That's what he said." Panic set in. Dwayne said he froze. I didn't know what would happen if I resisted. Everyone else in that tub had more money than me, more fame, and they weren't moving. It felt hypnotic. That was when someone beside the tub reached out and grabbed Dwayne's hand. I looked down, and I saw a face I recognized. I won't say their name, but they whispered, "It's better if you don't fight." He stepped forward, not into the soup, but into submission. That night broke something in him. It wasn't just the bath. It was the silence, the surrender. That's when I realized this wasn't a ritual for success. It was a ritual for control. Dwayne's jaw tightened as he recalled what came after the bath. His voice, once strong and charismatic, was now low, almost trembling. That night didn't end when I left the chamber. It followed me, haunted me. He testified that after the ritual, Diddy approached him privately in a candlelit corridor and placed a hand on his shoulder. "You're in now," Diddy told him. "You've passed the threshold. You're one of us." Dwayne nodded that night, but he didn't speak. "My throat felt like it was closing," he said. "I didn't want to agree. I didn't want to be part of whatever that was, but I also knew I couldn't just walk away." The very next day, things changed. I got calls from directors I hadn't heard from in years. Brand deals appeared out of nowhere. Roles I had been rejected for suddenly reopened. It was like doors had been kicked wide open overnight. But the price? Dwayne said it was steep. I started noticing people watching me. Not paparazzi, trained eyes, watching how I moved, what I said, who I associated with. My house in Hidden Hills? Someone left a candle in my mailbox, the same kind from that night, burnt halfway. I didn't light it. He also described strange meetings that would be arranged under the guise of business, only to turn into eerie, coded conversations with powerful people asking vague questions. "Have you tasted the soup?" one of them asked. I told them I didn't want any part of that world. They just smiled and said, "You already drank it, Dwayne. There's no going back." At this point in the testimony, the courtroom was silent. Some jurors leaned forward, wide-eyed. A few reporters stared in disbelief. The judge didn't interrupt. Dwayne then described the night he tried to walk away for good. It was 2 years later. I declined an invitation to a private event Diddy was hosting in Dubai. After that, the energy shifted. He claimed that shortly after turning down that invite, his father, Rocky Johnson, was hospitalized with unexplained complications. He got sick fast, no explanation, no diagnosis. I'm not saying Diddy did it, but it felt like a message. He went on to describe anonymous packages arriving at his home. One contained a photograph of the soup bath, with him barely visible in the background, eyes wide. No return address. Another package? A tomato soup can with no label, just a note. You know what this is. Dwayne looked out at the courtroom. That was the moment I realized this wasn't a fraternity. This wasn't mentorship. This was a cult, a system of power, and I was trapped. Dwayne took a deep breath, his hands clasped tightly in his lap as he continued. The worst part wasn't the ritual, he said. It was what it did to my family. He recounted how his home life began to fall apart in the months following the bath. I started pulling away from my wife. My relationship with my daughter grew tense. I was angry all the time, paranoid. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't explain it. But I felt like I was being watched from inside my own mind. He said Diddy would reach out at random. Calls at 3 a.m., he said, shaking his head. No greeting, just silence on the other end, sometimes music playing low. Once, it was the sound of boiling water. I'd hang up and try to ignore it, but it kept happening. Dwayne told the court he tried to cut ties completely. He changed his number. He stopped attending industry events. But every time he thought he was out, Diddy showed up again. I was filming a movie in Budapest, middle of nowhere. And who shows up on set? Diddy. No warning. Said he was just checking in. That wasn't a coincidence. He said that shortly after that encounter, he received divorce papers. I had been holding it together the best I could, but she couldn't live with the version of me that came back from Diddy's world. And I don't blame her. Then came the most disturbing moment. I walked into my backyard one night to clear my head, Dwayne said. And there he was, Diddy, sitting on a lawn chair near my pool. No invite, no security breach, just there, like he belonged. Dwayne asked him to leave. Diddy allegedly just smiled and said, "You know what this is, Rock. You know the price of walking away." The court was breathless. He said he contacted private investigators who told him they found no proof Diddy had been there. No security footage, no gate logs, nothing. But I know what I saw. And I know how it made me feel. Like I was losing my grip on reality. This led to Dwayne entering therapy, something he hadn't shared publicly until now. I needed help, he admitted, because this wasn't just stalking. It was psychological warfare, mind games. He paused and looked toward Diddy at the defense table. You don't just destroy careers, you destroy lives. And you almost destroyed mine. As Dwayne finished this part of his testimony, he leaned back slightly and closed his eyes. The courtroom sat in absolute silence until the judge gave a soft nod, allowing him a moment to collect himself before continuing. Dwayne Johnson sat motionless for a moment after the judge gave him time to breathe. But when he leaned back into the microphone, his voice cracked. What I'm about to say, I've never told anyone. Not my ex-wife, not my therapist, not my agent. I buried it because I didn't want to believe it was real. The room leaned in. He spoke about a second ritual, this one even more surreal than the first. It wasn't in a mansion. It wasn't even in the United States. It was in an underground spa beneath an old hotel in Switzerland. Diddy told me it was air-set weekend. Just a few friends, a safe space. But what Dwayne encountered was anything but safe. He said the spa had a circular hot spring that had been retrofitted with a custom marble tub, much like the one from the first ritual. But this time, there were even more people. There were at least 80 of us, he said. Famous faces, politicians, CEOs all naked from the waist down. No talking, just humming, and a soft rhythm of drums playing in the background. He said Diddy stood at the center, leading a chant in a language Dwayne didn't recognize. It wasn't English, it wasn't Latin, but everyone else seemed to know it. I just stood there, frozen. Then came what he called the collapse. One of the men in the tub started crying. Loud, guttural sobs. He tried to get out. 2 guards pulled him back in. That's when I realized we weren't allowed to leave. Dwayne said he managed to fake a panic attack, clutching his chest and gasping for breath. It worked. He was escorted out by a medical staff member who, oddly, said nothing during the entire exit. I flew home that night. I didn't even grab my luggage. I just needed to get away. But that was the beginning of the unraveling. He said he started seeing people from the spa in random places, at restaurants, gyms, airports, always watching, never talking, just staring. One of them left a bowl of tomato soup on my car, in the driver's seat. He told the court he began experiencing night terrors. I'd wake up screaming, drenched in sweat. The bath, the chanting, Diddy's eyes. They were always there. Then one night, during a live interview, he blacked out. I was mid-sentence, and then nothing. My brain shut down. They said it was exhaustion, but I knew what it was. Trauma. He paused, his hands now visibly shaking. I thought I could handle anything. I've taken hits in wrestling rings. I've fought through injuries on movie sets. But nothing, and I mean nothing, prepared me for the psychological pain Diddy put me through. A long silence followed. Dwayne wiped his brow and muttered, "This ain't strength. This is survival." Dwayne cleared his throat, trying to steady himself, but there was a visible shift in his demeanor. The facade of the unbreakable action star had cracked, and what remained was a man carrying decades of torment. "I never thought I'd be in this chair," he said softly. "Not because I didn't believe it would come to this, but because I didn't think I'd survive long enough to tell it." He told the court that after the Switzerland incident, his world became a maze of paranoia. Every movie set, every hotel room, every late-night knock on my door, I wondered if it was him or someone he sent. He described one particularly disturbing experience while filming a major action film overseas. We were shooting in Morocco. I had my own trailer, fully secured, private staff. But one night, I came back from a long shoot, and there was a bowl of soup waiting inside, on the floor. No one knew how it got there. No one claimed responsibility. I fired the entire security team, replaced everyone. That was when Dwayne knew something had to give. I started losing weight, couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. I looked in the mirror and didn't recognize myself. And the worst part? I was still afraid to speak. He detailed how his daughter once found him curled up on the floor of his home gym, shaking, unable to explain to her what was wrong. I told her I had the flu, but it wasn't the flu. It was the memory. It was the fear. Then he described a letter that pushed him over the edge. One day, I came home and found a black envelope on my kitchen counter. Inside, there was no note, just a single photo of me as a teenager. On the back, someone had written, We've always been watching. That was when I called my attorney and said, "It's time." Dwayne said his team tried to stop him. Friends begged him to stay quiet. Studios warned that speaking out might cost him everything. "But I didn't care anymore," he said. "I had already lost more than I could ever explain. I lost years of peace. I lost relationships. I lost myself." As the courtroom sat frozen, Dwayne suddenly grew visibly pale. He clutched his stomach mid-testimony and leaned forward. The judge asked if he needed a break. Dwayne nodded, clearly in distress. "I'm sorry," he whispered into the mic, his face flushed with shame. "I feel sick." He stood up and staggered slightly, before being guided out of the courtroom by security and court aides. Whispers filled the room. The moment, shocking, raw, and human, underscored the toll his truth was taking. He would return later, but in that moment, it was clear. The pain wasn't just emotional. It was physical. Dwayne Johnson had just opened the darkest chapter of his life, and his body couldn't take it all at once. When Dwayne Johnson returned to the stand after the break, his face was pale, but his voice carried a new intensity. The room hushed again as he adjusted the microphone. "What happened in that bathroom? It wasn't just about being sick," he said. "It was my body reacting to everything I've kept buried for years. My mind had caught up to the truth long ago, but my body finally snapped. It couldn't hold the weight anymore." He wiped his brow and continued. "I sat on that cold bathroom floor thinking about the first time I ever met Diddy. I was still in the WWE. I thought he was just another flashy celebrity. But from day one, he looked at me like I was a piece on his board. Like he had plans for me, and I let it slide, thinking it was just showbiz ego. But now, I know better." He told the jury that Diddy's influence wasn't limited to music or fashion. He had reach into politics, law enforcement, production studios. You'd hear whispers, "Don't say no to Diddy," or "Once you're in, you're in." But no one ever explained why. It was just accepted. Dwayne revealed that several other high-profile figures approached him over the years and hinted at ritual obligations. Some used humor, others used fear. One of them joked about a midnight mask bath at a Vegas hotel, laughing like it was all fun and games, but his eyes said otherwise. It wasn't a joke. He described one particularly bizarre dinner where every guest was served soup. Again, the tomato kind. "They told me it was symbolic, cleansing, but I couldn't even lift the spoon. All I could see was that bath, the steam, the smell, the hums. It ruined me." He said that after that dinner, he threw up in the parking lot, then sat in his car shaking for 40 minutes. The rituals weren't just events. They were trauma, Dwayne said. They branded you, owned a piece of you, and every time you tried to break free, they reminded you what you'd seen and what you could lose. He looked directly at the judge. "I know I'm not the first, and I won't be the last, but I couldn't keep living with the silence. I've carried this for too long. I lost everything trying to protect my image. But now, I just want peace, not fame, not forgiveness. Peace." The courtroom remained breathless. The Rock, the icon of strength, had exposed his deepest vulnerability, and now the whole world was listening. Dwayne Johnson sat forward now, shoulders hunched, eyes darkened with a quiet fire. "There's one more thing," he said, his voice hoarse but clear. "Something I've never spoken aloud until now." He described a night that haunted him more than any other, a night at Diddy's private retreat in the woods of Northern California. I'd gone months without contact. I thought maybe I was free. But then I got an invitation. Not a phone call, not a text. A letter, sealed in wax. Hand-delivered. No return address. Inside it was just one line. One last gathering. For the ones who know. Dwayne said he burned the letter at first. Tried to forget it. But curiosity, or fear, pulled him back in. Something in me said I had to go. I needed closure. I needed to see if the nightmare was really over. When he arrived at the estate, hidden deep in redwoods, the road was lined with candles. Attendants in cloaks took his phone. No one spoke. No music. Just a deep, rhythmic hum, vibrating through the earth. It wasn't a party, Dwayne said. It was a ceremony. He walked past dozens of faces, some masked, some not. People he knew. Some he only recognized from tabloids or business articles. They weren't acting like themselves. Their eyes were dead. They looked empty. Diddy was at the center again, seated on a stone platform, surrounded by bowls of hot water, steam rising into the cold night. He didn't even speak. He just nodded, and everyone knelt. Dwayne didn't kneel. "That's when two men grabbed me," he said, his voice shaking. "I fought back. I screamed, 'This is over. You don't own me.' But no one flinched. No one helped. They just watched. He managed to escape, stumbling through the woods for miles, barefoot, in silence. I walked until the sun rose. I didn't stop, not even when my feet bled. I swore that day I would never let Diddy have another second of my mind." He paused and exhaled, his chest rising and falling slowly. "But even now, even as I sit here, I feel like he's watching, like he's always been watching." The courtroom sat in frozen silence. One juror quietly wiped a tear. Dwayne turned toward them and said, "I don't need pity. I need justice. And if my story can help bring that, then maybe, just maybe, I can finally sleep through the night." He leaned back, exhausted, but defiant. The Rock had laid it all bare, and the world would never see him, or Diddy, the same way again. The courtroom was deathly still. The judge, the jury, the media, all sat frozen as Dwayne Johnson, The Rock, leaned back into the microphone for his final statement. What had started as just another celebrity witness appearance had transformed into a soul-bearing confession. He looked around slowly, his voice steady now. Not broken, not trembling, but calm, with the weight of finality behind every word. "I'm not here because I want revenge," he began. "I'm not here because someone paid me. I'm here because I have daughters. And one day, they'll ask me what I stood for. I need them to know I didn't stay quiet when it mattered most." He revealed that after the retreat in California, he had gone through what he called a silent war. Not with Diddy directly, but with his own mind, his own life. "I started turning down roles, started avoiding premieres. People thought I was just burned out, but I was hiding. I was ashamed. I felt like I'd let something evil grow around me, and I'd done nothing to stop it." Dwayne told the court that for nearly a year, he kept a journal documenting everything: names, places, rituals, encounters. "Not because I planned to ever testify," he said, "but because I needed to remind myself it was real, that I hadn't made it up." He reached into his coat pocket and produced that same black leather notebook. The judge allowed him to read an excerpt aloud. October 12, 2020. "Woke up sweating again. Dreamed I was back in the tub. Steam so thick I couldn't see their faces. But I could feel Diddy's hand on my shoulder. He whispered, 'You're one of us now. You can't leave." I screamed, but no sound came out. I wonder if this is how it ends for me, haunted until the day I die. He closed the journal, looked up, and said, "That was the day I decided to fight." Dwayne concluded with a warning, not to the jury, but to the other celebrities watching. The ones still silent, the ones still protecting the system. You know who you are. You know what you've seen. You know what you've done. If I can come forward, so can you. But if you stay quiet, just remember, these secrets never die. They rot you from the inside. He turned toward Diddy, who sat stone-faced at the defense table. "You didn't break me. You tried, but I'm still here." And with that, Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson stepped down from the witness stand. Not as a wrestler, not as an actor, but as a man who had finally told the truth. The gallery erupted into hushed murmurs. Reporters frantically scribbled notes. The judge banged the gavel for silence, but nothing could silence what had just been said. The trial would continue. More testimonies would follow. But this day, day 15, belonged to The Rock, and the world would never forget it.